My daughter threw my house keys on the counter like she owned the place, and announced that she expected breakfast ready at 5 a.m. tomorrow for her new husband, who likes everything his way. 24 hours later, I was setting their alarm for 4 a.m. But the surprise I had planned for their morning coffee was going to give them a wake-up call they'd never forget. Let me tell you how we got to that moment, because what happened next changed everything. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. My name is Evelyn Vance, and at 54, I thought I'd seen every possible way my daughter could disappoint me. Boy, was I wrong about that. It was a Tuesday in late August when Chloe showed up at my Monterey Bayfront cottage with her brand new husband, Julian, 3 massive suitcases, and an attitude that could have powered the entire Pacific Coast Highway. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the deck, watching the sea otters play in the kelp beds, when I heard a car door slam hard enough to wake the dead. Through the glass doors, I could see my 26-year-old daughter marching up the stone path with a man I'd never met trailing behind her like a well-dressed shadow. "Mom," she called out, not bothering to knock before pushing through my front door. "We're here." I hadn't invited anyone. The last time we'd spoken was 3 weeks ago when she'd hung up on me for suggesting that getting married to someone she'd known for 4 months might be a bit hasty. "Chloe," I said, walking in from the deck with my coffee still in hand. "What a surprise!" She was already dragging luggage toward the guest staircase, her new husband standing awkwardly by the door like he wasn't sure he was supposed to be there. "Julian, this is my mother, Evelyn." "Mom, this is Julian, my husband." She said it with that emphasis people use when they want to make sure you understand they've made a life-changing decision without consulting you. Julian stepped forward with what I had to admit was a charming smile and extended his hand. "Mrs. Vance, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Chloe talks about this place constantly." "Does she?" I shook his hand, noting the expensive watch and the custom-tailored shirt. "And what brings you both to my little sanctuary?" "Unannounced." "We're on our honeymoon," Chloe announced, as if that explained everything. "We wanted somewhere peaceful and private. Plus, hotels are so impersonal, don't you think?" I looked around my living room, which was definitely not set up for unexpected house guests. My yoga mat was still rolled out from my morning routine. There were paintbrushes soaking in a mason jar from yesterday's art session, and my latest mystery novel was face down on the couch right where I'd left it. "How long were you thinking of staying?" I asked, though I suspected I wasn't going to like the answer. "Just a few days," Julian said quickly, shooting a look at Chloe that I didn't miss. "Maybe a week," Chloe corrected. "We haven't really decided." "That's the beauty of being spontaneous, right, Mom? You always said life was about embracing the unexpected." I had said that back when she was 17 and afraid to apply to college out of state. I hadn't meant it as permission to treat my home like a free hotel over a decade later. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? "Let me show you to the guest room." As I led them upstairs, I caught Julian looking around with the sort of appreciation that comes from knowing property values. The Bayfront cottage had been my sanctuary for the past 6 years, ever since my divorce from Chloe's father. It was modest by Monterey standards, but still worth a small fortune. "This is beautiful, Mrs. Vance," Julian said, genuinely. "You have incredible taste." "Thank you," I said, opening the guest room door and noting that I need to change the sheets and clear out the boxes of old photo albums I'd been storing on the bed. "I wasn't expecting company, so give me a few minutes to make it habitable." "Don't go to any trouble, Mom," Chloe said, already bouncing on the mattress to test it. "We're just happy to be here." That afternoon, while they went for a walk along the coastal trail, I prepared the room properly and tried to figure out why this visit felt different from Chloe's usual dramatic entrances. Maybe it was the way Julian had looked at the house, or maybe it was the fact that she'd gotten married without even telling me, but something was definitely off. By dinner time, I had my answer. Julian excused himself to take a phone call, and Chloe helped herself to a glass of my good Pinot Noir without asking. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," she said, settling onto my couch like she owned it. "I'm listening." "Julian and we're not just here for a romantic getaway." She paused dramatically, swirling her wine. "We're here because we think it might be time for you to consider your living situation." My living situation? I kept my voice level, though something cold was beginning to spread through my chest. You're all alone out here. What if something happened? What if you fell or had an emergency? Julian thinks, and I agree, that it might be safer for you to move into something more manageable, closer to town. Maybe a nice condo. I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd given birth to, nursed through countless illnesses, supported through her tumultuous early 20s. And you thought you'd just show up here and convince me to sell my house. Not sell it, exactly. She took another sip of wine, avoiding my eyes. Julian has some experience in real estate investment. He thinks this property could be much better utilized if it was, properly managed. The pieces clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. The unexpected visit. The new husband with the expensive taste. The suggestion that I was too old and frail to live safely in my own home. How thoughtful of Julian to take such an interest in my welfare. Mom, don't be like that. We're trying to help you. Help me what, exactly? Make some smart financial decisions. You could live very comfortably on the proceeds from this place, and Julian could handle all the investment details. It would be like having your own personal financial advisor. For 26 years, I'd watched my daughter's gift for rationalization. But this was impressive, even for her. She'd married a stranger and was now suggesting I hand over my home to him for proper management. That's incredibly generous, I said. But I'm quite happy with my current living situation. Chloe's smile tightened. Mom, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't it be better to make these changes while you can still enjoy the benefits? Julian chose that moment to return, his charming smile back in place. Sorry about that. Business never stops. You know how it is. Actually, I don't, I said. What business are you in, Julian? Property development, investment consulting. I help people maximize their real estate potential. How convenient. The three of us sat there for a moment, the tension thick enough to spread on toast. Julian seemed to sense that his new wife's subtle approach wasn't working. Mrs. Vance, he said, leaning forward with the kind of sincerity that probably worked wonders in boardrooms. I hope you don't think we're being presumptuous. Chloe just worries about you. And when she told me about this beautiful property sitting here underutilized. Underutilized? Well, for one person, it seems like a lot of house. I looked around my living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows facing the bay, the fireplace I'd spent countless evenings reading beside, the kitchen where I taught myself to cook for one and discovered I actually enjoyed it. You're right, I said finally. It is a lot of house for one person. That's what makes it perfect. The next morning was when Chloe dropped the bomb that would change everything. I was making omelets for 3 when my daughter delivered the speech that revealed exactly how entitled she'd become. Mom, I need to talk to you about expectations, Chloe said, not looking up from her phone while I stood at the stove like hired help. What kind of expectations? Julian was seated at my kitchen island reading financial news on his tablet. Well, since we're staying here, I think it's important to establish some ground rules. Julian has very specific requirements for his morning routine. He's an early riser. Likes to get his day started right. Quality nutrition, quiet environment for his morning calls with the East Coast. I glanced at Julian, who was nodding along like his wife was discussing something perfectly reasonable. That sounds like Julian's problem to solve, I said pleasantly. Actually, Mom, I was hoping you could help with that. Chloe's voice took on that wheedling tone that used to work when she was 10 and wanted a puppy. Since you're always up early anyway, and you love to cook. I love to cook for myself, on my schedule. Julian looked up from his tablet with a smile that probably cost him thousands in dental work. Mrs. Vance, what Chloe is trying to say is that we'd be incredibly grateful for any assistance you could provide as the host. As if I'd invited them to come disrupt my peaceful existence and then start making demands about breakfast service. I see, I said, turning back to my eggs before I said something that would reveal exactly how I was feeling about their attitude. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, Chloe continued, apparently taking my silence as agreement. Just something ready by 5 a.m. Julian likes his coffee strong, no sugar, and maybe some eggs Benedict or fresh fruit. Nothing too complicated. 5 a.m. She wanted me to get up at 4 a.m. to prepare eggs Benedict for her husband of a week who had the audacity to suggest my home was underutilized. Eggs Benedict, I said slowly. Or whatever you think is appropriate. You're so good at this domestic stuff, Mom. It's really one of your strengths. Like domestic service was a talent I should be proud to share. I served their breakfast and watched Julian cut into his eggs with the precision of someone who'd never had to cook for himself. This is delicious, he said. You're quite the chef, Mrs. Vance. Thank you. It's really perfect training for when you move into a smaller place, Chloe added, apparently unable to let the real estate conversation go. You'll have so much more time for cooking when you don't have all the space to maintain. After breakfast, they announced they were driving into Carmel to explore. As I watched their rental car disappear, I wasn't thinking about dinner preparations. I was thinking about alarm clocks and exactly what kind of surprise I could prepare for Julian's 5 a.m. breakfast requirement. I spent the afternoon doing research. Julian Thorne owned 2 LLCs, one of which had been dissolved the previous year. His property development business had exactly one project listed, a small commercial building in Fresno that was currently in foreclosure proceedings. I also discovered Julian had been married once before to a woman named Maria Flores, who'd owned a successful boutique in Santa Barbara. The business had been sold suddenly 3 years ago, right around the time their divorce was finalized. But the most interesting thing I found was a small article about a lawsuit filed by an elderly couple who claimed they'd been pressured into selling their property below market value to an investment company called Thorne Holdings LLC. By the time Chloe and Julian returned, I had a much clearer picture of what they were really doing here. And I had a plan. You know, I've been thinking about what you both said, I replied that evening, and watched them exchange a quick look of triumph. The logic is quite clear. I smiled at Julian. And I've been thinking about your breakfast requirements, too. I'll make sure everything is ready for you tomorrow morning. Something special. At 4 a.m., my alarm went off just like I'd promised. Coffee first. Julian liked it strong, no sugar. I ground the beans fresh and added my own special ingredient, a hefty dose of senna extract, the active component in natural laxative tablets. Enough to turn his digestive system into a ticking time bomb, but not enough to actually harm him. I crushed up 3 more tablets and mixed them into the rich, buttery hollandaise sauce. The beauty of hollandaise is its complex flavor, a little extra bitterness would be completely masked by the lemon and butter. At exactly 4:55 a.m., Julian appeared. Mrs. Vance? You actually did this. You said 5 a.m. I aim to please. I watched him take his first sip of coffee and smiled. I believe in giving people exactly what they ask for. He ate with enthusiasm, complimenting the eggs, praising the coffee. You're quite the hostess, he said. Chloe was right when she said you had a gift for this. I have many gifts, I replied. Some of them take longer to reveal themselves than others. About 45 minutes after breakfast, I heard the first signs that my special recipe was taking effect. Julian's voice drifted from upstairs, calling Chloe's name with urgency. Chloe, where's the bathroom? Over the next hour, Julian made 6 trips to the bathroom. By the 5th, he was practically running. I don't understand what's wrong with him, Chloe said, pacing. He never gets sick. Food poisoning can be very sudden, I said sympathetically. Julian appeared in the doorway, pale and sweating. Chloe, I need you to call a doctor. Something is seriously wrong. By lunchtime, he was too weak to come downstairs. They spent 3 hours at an urgent care, only to be told he had a severe case of food poisoning and needed to rest. When they returned, Julian looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost. The doctor said it was probably something he ate yesterday, Chloe announced. How terrible, I said. I feel so guilty. What if it was something I served this morning? No, Mom. The doctor said the timing doesn't match. Food poisoning from breakfast would have started much sooner. Julian collapsed onto the guest bed. Mrs. Vance, I'm so sorry about this. Don't you worry about anything, I said, arranging pillows behind his back. Your only job is to get better. The next morning, Julian emerged looking significantly improved but cautious. Mrs. Vance, he said, tentatively sipping the herbal tea I'd prepared. I hope we can continue our conversation about your living situation. Of course, I said. In fact, your illness yesterday made me realize how isolated I am out here. If something serious happened to me, no one would know. His eyes lit up. See, Chloe? That's exactly what we've been trying to tell you. Yes, you've been very persuasive. I poured him more tea. Julian, you mentioned you had experience helping other people with their property decisions. I'd love to see some documentation of your previous work. Success stories, client testimonials. Of course, he said, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. I can have my assistant email you some examples. For the next hour, Julian laid out his vision for my future. I would sell the house to his investment company for a fair market price, the proceeds would be invested in a portfolio he would manage, and I would move to a small condo. He would handle all the financial details for a modest management fee. It was a beautiful plan, for Julian. This all sounds very professional, I said when he finished. I'm impressed. I stood up. I think I'm ready to move forward. The look of triumph on his face was almost worth the week of listening to him treat my house like his personal resort. Actually, I said, raising a hand. I'd like to invite some other people to be part of this decision. My attorney, my financial advisor, and I've also invited Maria Flores to join us. The color drained from Julian's face. Maria? Yes, your ex-wife. Such a sweet woman. We had the most interesting conversation yesterday while you were recovering. Chloe looked between us. Mom, you talked to his ex-wife? Just doing my due diligence, I said cheerfully. She had such fascinating stories about your business practices, Julian. Especially regarding her boutique, the one that was sold so suddenly. Mrs. Vance, Julian said carefully. I think there may have been some misunderstandings. Oh, I don't think so. She was very clear about how you convinced her to put her business up as collateral for investments that didn't work out. I walked to the counter and picked up a manila folder. Would you like to see the complaint I filed yesterday with the State Attorney General's office? It details a pattern of elder fraud targeting homeowners. I included Maria's testimony and documentation from an Eleanor Patterson in Fresno, whose house is now in foreclosure thanks to you. Julian stood up abruptly. You have no proof. I have Eleanor Patterson's frightened voice on my phone. I have Maria's sworn statement. And I have a forensic accountant who's very interested in Thorn Holdings LLC. I looked directly at him. You used my own daughter to get close to me. You thought I was a helpless middle-aged woman who'd be grateful for male guidance. But you miscalculated. Julian made a break for the door, but I wasn't trying to stop him. I wanted him to run. As he rushed upstairs to pack, Chloe remained at the table, staring at the documents. Mom, she said quietly, did I really bring a criminal into your house? You brought someone who saw you as a tool. The criminal part was just his method. What happens now? Now you decide whether you're going to be part of the solution or part of the problem. Julian was gone within minutes. What he left behind was my daughter, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the evidence of her husband's criminal activities, and about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. Later that afternoon, Detective Miller from the Financial Crimes Division arrived. Mrs. Vance, the complaint you filed has opened a larger investigation. We've identified multiple victims. Julian Thorne appears to have been operating this scheme for years. Chloe, who had been listening, finally spoke up. Detective, what's going to happen to me? I married him, but I didn't know. That depends on whether you're willing to cooperate. I'll cooperate, Chloe said immediately. I'll tell you everything. As the detective interviewed us, I watched my daughter carefully recount Julian's business contacts, his methods, his lies. There was a new strength in her voice, a dawning clarity. After the detective left, we sat on the deck watching the sunset. Mom, Chloe said finally, I owe you an enormous apology. For bringing him here, for the way we treated you, for everything. You owe me more than an apology, Chloe. You owe me an explanation of how you could watch your husband treat me like hired help and think that was acceptable. I know. I was so caught up in feeling important and being married to someone successful that I lost sight of what was right. How do I make this right? You start by taking responsibility for your choices, I said. And then you figure out who you want to be when you're not trying to impress someone who was using you. That evening, Julian called. Chloe put him on speaker. Chloe, your mother has been telling lies about me to the police. His panicked voice filled the room. Julian, she said carefully. I talked to Eleanor Patterson today. Silence. She told me about her house, about the missing payments. She told me about the foreclosure. Chloe, that's a complicated business situation. Julian, I said, leaning toward the phone. This is Evelyn. I think you should know your wife has decided to cooperate with the police. Chloe, don't listen to her. We can work through this. No, Julian, we can't, she said, her voice strong and clear. I'm filing for divorce. She hung up and turned off her phone. That felt good, she said, surprising both of us. Good, I replied. It should. In the weeks that followed, Chloe moved into my guest room properly this time, and we began the long process of untangling her life from Julian's. The FBI built a massive case against him and his network. Chloe testified before a grand jury. I learned that my daughter, beneath the entitlement and poor judgment, had a core of steel I'd never fully appreciated. Julian's second mistake was underestimating how thoroughly I'd documented his stay. His first mistake was trying to con me in the first place. Today, my daughter no longer looks for other people to make her feel important. She's learning to find that within herself. And I still live in my beautiful bayfront cottage. But now I also volunteer with a nonprofit that educates seniors about financial fraud. I use my experience to help others protect themselves. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's reclaiming your power, protecting your family, and ensuring the person who wronged you never gets to do it again. Julian wanted my house. Instead, he gave me back my daughter and a purpose I never knew I needed. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.